You can believe it on TikTok, Stregonona. That's becoming like a look. Oh my gosh. Just
So I have dream biscuits, and these are, if you're getting bullied, you need to make sure that you land a really good, strong, hard punch the first time. Welcome to Read It and Eat It in the Library. I'm Cheryl Sikora, and with me today is our guest Andrea Fallscheer. She is a good friend and former co-worker. Today we are going to be talking about My Grandmother Sends Her Regards and Apologizes by Frederik Backman. Thanks for being here.
my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
So tell me about why you chose this book.
Well, when I sent you it as a suggestion, I hadn't read it yet.
Okay.
So I was kind of sending it blind. But based on the fact that I had read A Man Called Ove several years ago and absolutely loved it, like one of my favorite books of all time,
Absolutely,
possibly. Me too. So since then I read Beartown, and then there was a follow-up to Beartown. Those were much more serious, somber books by him. But I'd heard in the reviews that this one kind of got back to a little bit of the humor that I found in A Man Called Ove. I mean, humor slash humanity,
Life
feeling,
insight,
lots of tears. So I was thinking that this might be a little bit of that. So I thought, let's take a chance.
That sounds great. I loved it. I first read the book in 2020, and when I reread it this time, I don't know if I was reading it slower for the sake of preparing for this, but I found it much more emotional than I did the first time around. The first time around, I remember it being so funny and entertaining and real, and I cried so many times when I read this book.
I think this author is just really good at using humor to counter these sort of real human experiences and emotion. And I don't know, 2020 versus 2024, like life changes. And I feel like there was a lot of, I don't know, personal connections I could feel in the book, with, grandparents passing away and families changing and all of the dynamics that were happening for these characters. It was pretty real, but still so entertaining.
I totally agree. Are you an easy crier?
Absolutely.
Me too. I used to make fun of my mom when I was young because she would be crying at the commercials and she would be crying at my band concerts, and I was just like, that is so ridiculous. I was quite horrible to her. And now I cry at the end of Top Chef. And I cry at the Super Bowl commercials, and I cried when Granny died. I cried when the psychologist was telling her story, or they were telling about her story. I cried when I think it's worse or the verse.
Worse. I was in my head it was worse, but you're right, it might be verse, I'm not sure.
I cried when that guy died, and it was,
Yeah.
it was super emotional for me this time around.
I hear you.
What are your thoughts about translated books?
Well, I've read my fair share, I feel like, over time. Because this book was originally written in Swedish, I know that there is zero possibility that I would have ever written it or read it had it not been translated. So I think I'm all for translations. I think there's times when there's something to be gained by reading it in the language it was originally written in. And, as a side note, in my day job side of things, like as a French teacher, I feel like there's times when reading authentic texts written in French is really valuable. But in cases like this, when you're reading for entertainment, go for it. I think there's a whole world of options out there, so why not? And one of the things that impressed me, and I was kind of thinking, I love that question because I was really actually remarking this at the beginning of the text, and I couldn't remember the example. I wish I could remember it. But there were some wordplay examples in the book, and I thought, what an amazing job the translator did, because that's not the author, that's the translator trying to parallel that wordplay in English.
I also thought of that. It's the part that stuck out to me was the dream biscuits.
Okay.
And frequently they had some dreams, but it could have been dreams
Yes.
when they were actually eating the biscuits or the cookies.
Yes.
So that's one example that caught
Yes.
Yeah.
And I thought it's a sort of like a real behind the scenes job, but that the translation was pretty impressive. I mean, obviously I'm not gonna be able to read the original to know how accurate it was, but humor is hard to translate, and this, I mean, it came through loud and clear, so.
And also, I thought, like this, I didn't research the translator, but I assume they were British, right? Because they would have said cookies, not biscuits.
Yeah,
And
that's
there's
right.
a few different things like that. But even still, with that gap in the English language, I still found it funny. And yeah, so. But that being said, I have read books translated from Japanese that I was just, I think there's something here that I'm not
Missing.
quite getting there. Or I've read a couple of recently translated Korean books where I kind of felt the same, where it was talking about a coffee shop and just kind of situations that I know well, but I just wasn't connecting. So it could have been a cultural thing, it could have been a translation thing, I don't know. But I frequently struggle with translations. However, I've read a bunch of books translated from Swedish, and I've never noticed that with the Swedish books.
So maybe there's something to that style of translation, like maybe there's certain styles of books or certain languages that are easier to translate or make for better translations, I don't know.
I did look it up, and 90% of Swedish people also speak English. So I wondered if a good portion of their life does occasionally happen in English, and so the translation kind of happens differently. I took a couple of translation classes in university, and I was really excited about them because I thought this is going to be a good skill to have, and it's going to be super useful, and they crushed me. I thought I wasn't offended by the critiques of translating English to French, because that's fine. But I still didn't do well on the translations from French to English. And I'm like,
that should be the easy one.
it should be.
Yeah, because that's where you understand the nuance. Like, it's hard to translate into a second or a third language, whereas translating into your own language, it's not just about the grammar necessarily.
Right.
It's so much about
It actually left me
The
wondering,
goal.
like, do I speak less French than I think I do? Am I actually misunderstanding a bunch of things? I think the answer is no. It's just translation is it's not for me.
Yeah, and it's not easy.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, not easy at all.
So I looked up, have you ever been to Sweden?
I have not.
Me neither. I didn't really know anything about it, but I learned a couple of fun facts. There are 10.5 million people in Sweden, which is an average of 20 people per square kilometer, which means nothing to me until you put it in the Canadian context, where there are 4 people per square kilometer. So they're pretty significantly more densely populated than we are, but I suppose most of the rest of the world is like that. Swedish people are responsible for the development of the pacemaker, Minecraft, and Spotify. So, yeah, who knew?
Very cool.
So we talked a little bit about the humor. One thing that I was wondering is, do you think, and wordplay and lots of fun language usage, which is fantastic for translation, but I wondered, like, do you have any insight in terms of, do you think this is like Swedish sense of humor, or do you think this is Frederik Backman himself, or?
Well, I think he certainly has a skill for it. There's no doubt about that. But I tried to think of other Swedish stories that I've read, and I haven't read a lot. But I read one, I'm gonna get the title wrong, but it's something along the lines of the 100-year-old man that climbed out a window, something.
Yes, I have read that as well.
It was funny. Like,
It's very funny.
I feel like it had some of that same wit to it. Like a little bit of, you have to infer the humor, and so to me that was sort of like a common thread. So that might be a Swedish thing then. That was a Swedish author. And this might sound strange, but I feel like there is almost some connection between, no, these are not funny books, but something about the language and the wordplay with books like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Obviously not meant to be humorous, but just some of the ways that language was used to paint pictures to me, I'm like, yeah, I could kind of see a little bit of something Swedish, I guess, in all of those.
Mm-hmm. Thinking back to Pippi Longstocking too, and
Yeah.
Astrid Lindgren, it was Swedish,
Yeah.
and there's lots of very entertaining wordplay in that too.
Absolutely.
So I think the answer is probably both, right? Maybe
Mhm.
it's a Swedish sense of humor and Frederik
And he just
Backman
has a
is-
real mastery of
It's
it. Yeah.
hilarious, totally. Elsa is 7 going on 8, which we learn many times
Mhm.
in the book. And so do you have any memories that you'd be willing to share with us from when you were 7?
Well, not a lot, I don't think. Not a ton of really vivid memories. But I think as a theme through those ages, I think back to a lot of wild play. And this is sort of like that, I think that way I can kind of feel connected to Elsa a little bit is like she's always on an adventure. You know, so much of the book is about her adventuring, finding the letters and all of the treasure hunt that she has to do. So I wouldn't say mine was quite that explicit, but like I'm talking riding bikes, walking through the woods. Like I grew up living on an acreage, and I just spent a lot of time outside. Of course, we're from the era where you kind of got 2 channels and had a lot of books, but otherwise you were kind of outside playing. And so I feel like my childhood at that age was a little bit of that wildness of like digging trenches in the driveway so the rainwater could run down, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then I think also a little bit about school at that time, because when you say 7 or 8, I can think, okay, like, do I remember grade 2? Do I remember grade 3? And I do have some memories of that. I had the same teacher for both grade 2 and grade 3, and I can vividly remember sitting on the carpet as she read stories to the class. And it was interesting because just today on the radio, someone said something about stregonona. Like, if you can believe it, on TikTok, stregonona, that's becoming like a look. Oh my gosh. Which so just today as I was driving for work between one school to another, it's like they talked about stregonona, and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. So when you asked that question today, it's like the first time I heard stregonona was when my teacher, Mrs. Pizzota in grade 2, read it to the class and just loved it, loved that book and connected with it and all the other stories that she read. So I feel like that's such an age for, you know, your imagination is growing and your sense of adventure and wanting to see kind of windows to the world that way.
I totally agree. I felt myself wondering when she would, like, it seemed like she was dropped off a lot of places. Like, her dad would drop her off at her house, and then the mom wasn't home.
Yeah, just
And
drive away.
But I think, like, at 7, that's pretty young, but I think in our culture we've kind of swung past the, you know, the hypervigilant.
Mm-hmm.
We're past hypervigilant and on to something else that I don't know quite what it's called. And we could, maybe 7 on their own is a little bit young for my tastes, but I think we could swing a little bit more the other way to just give kids a little bit more freedom, for sure.
It makes me think about one of the things that I felt really developed in that story was that sense of community. Like, it felt at the beginning that we were reading about a house of very separate people, you know, that were kind of very private unto themselves, disconnected. And by the end of the story, you realize this is really one big dysfunctional, not so happy all the time, but this is one big family. So I guess the drop off maybe from his adult view of things was like, well, there's 8 people in this building that are there that have eyes on her that she maybe didn't really connect the dots about too.
Yeah, it was really a curated family, hey? It was super cool like that.
I love stories where so much of the connection is revealed over time, and this really delivered in that department where you don't know what they all have lived through together.
And this crew didn't seem to even know themselves.
Yeah,
for sure.
And so much was revealed. So
yeah. So I remember quite a bit in theory. I'm sure that my memories have morphed over the years since I was 7 or 8, but I had the same teacher for grade 1 and 2. Her name was Miss Sakoko, and she was my first encounter of a teacher who had very clear expectations and very disciplinarian. Like my kindergarten and preschool teachers were the typical, like, I'm so happy to see you, welcome to the, and then she had rules. And she was a big fan of choral speaking.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness. I can still remember we had yellow file folders, and many of my classmates could barely read, but we had these pages and pages, and there were rectangles around the words that indicated the direction, the inflection that you were supposed. I think this choral speaking inspired my lifelong dislike for poetry.
Okay.
Because she was just really
it was
and
intense.
good for her for being passionate, but we went to competitions, like we went to the music festival for choral speaking, our group did, and that's what we did for all of the assemblies and the Christmas pageants, and I just remembered, like, there's got to be something else available to us besides this choral speaking and this yellow file folder with my words in it. The other thing that Miss Sakoko was really passionate about was printing and penmanship.
Yeah.
And so I remember, like in my mind, it's about this thick of legal size pages of Gestetner copied, like purple pages.
Oh yeah.
Where we had to practice each letter, like we got a packet for each letter. And I remember at the end of the year, going like, clunk on this tape. Anyways, those are my very clear memories of grade 2. And I loved school, but yeah, not Gestetner printing practice and choral speaking for sure.
How's your penmanship today? Did it pay off?
Yeah, I don't think so.
I
wish
so
that it
what's the
did.
point?
That is one of the things that I would love to have beautiful penmanship, like the old school letter style writing, grandma penmanship. I would love it, not so much that I'm willing to practice or change, but I would really like to have that
That's
skill.
a real art. In fact, I remember buying for one of the kids a calligraphy set and practice book, probably for Christmas or a birthday or something, and it has sat on our shelf forever that nobody else took interest in, and I thought, well, it's probably wasn't their interest to begin with. I think it is mine. So I actually took it out and tried a little bit, and it's, I don't know, it's something, it's kind of like adult coloring books. There's something very soothing in just being able to do something that doesn't take a lot of thinking.
I use a fountain pen on a regular basis. I end up usually covered in ink, but on occasion when I get like that nice flourish where the arc of the F kind of just and like it's one letter, but it attracts my attention and I get really excited about it.
That is exciting.
So frequently in books, I get irritated at the younger characters or the teenage characters in how they're portrayed because, like, not being that far removed from having kids that age, I feel like I have a fairly good understanding of what a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old can accomplish. And I think she calls herself different and she's really quite extraordinary, but there was nothing about her character that kind of like, oh, come on, that's not realistic. Despite that there were so many unrealistic situations, none of it bothered me.
Yeah, I think she was a very well-written character because I think it's someone that, as a almost 50-year-old woman, I could relate to this little girl, and maybe it's sort of that inner child thing, but she was very relatable. She was doing all kinds of things that I don't think many 7-year-olds actually do in real life. But you're right, you never questioned it.
For sure.
Yeah, very precocious, I think. Yeah, there was something kind of admirable, I think, in all of what she did.
I super enjoyed the word jar when she would have an impressive piece of vocabulary. She's like, word jar.
Yeah, loved it.
I might take that up if I ever have grandchildren one day. I might have a word jar.
I think that's one of the really cool things about the story too, is that idea of second chances, right? And a grandmother who, by all accounts, was not a wonderful mother, but turned out to be the most wonderful grandmother. So I know there's some hope in that, I guess.
Speaking of which, what are some favorite memories of your grandparents?
Oh, what a nice question. I feel like I was so blessed with the grandparents that I had. My grandfather was very much the doer, the adventure, the fun. Like, he brought all of that. So I have memories of they lived about 8 hours from where I grew up, so we didn't see them often, but when we did, it was, real quality time. And anytime they came for a visit, they'd get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning where they lived, drive to our house, kind of get settled in, and then he would always be waiting. My grandmother would stay at home because she'd be busy helping in the kitchen, doing that kind of thing. And he would be parked outside my school, and he would be waiting at his car, and we would go to the Hubba Bubba store, which was it was called Brookfield Market, which was down the street from the school, and we'd stop, and that was in the days when you had actual penny candy, and you could pick out what you wanted and buy a little bag of candy and a great pack of Hubba Bubba and go home. So it was like, that was the thing. So that's just one little example of all of the, I guess, the fun he brought to any of the time we spent together. And my grandmother just as much, but she was in a much quieter, gentler way. The time with her was baking, that was making cookies. She'd bring pie crust every time, and we'd make something, and there was just a lot of like tenderness in that relationship. So yeah, it was just wonderful. I have so many good memories. But it's interesting because as an adult, you do learn about, the bigger life of grandparents, and they're not perfect, and there's, they're human just like we are. And I think that's an important lesson to learn. And I think we see that so strong in the book too, where it's like, you can kind of be different things for different people. And who do I want to be? And I hope I can be the kind of grandparents that they were. Yeah.
My grandparents were kind of the opposite roles of your grandparents. My granny was the feisty one,
Okay.
and the rule breaker. And you probably met my granny actually.
Did I?
She used to hang out at St. Thomas.
Okay, I
quite a bit
probably
with my
have
girls.
then. Yes.
Anyways, she used to say things that like absolutely made my mom like stand back in horror. Like she would say, if you're getting bullied, you need to make sure that you land a really good, strong, hard punch the first time.
Yeah.
So you only have to do it once.
Yeah.
And I was just like a tiny, timid little thing. And I'd be like, okay. My mom's like, sure, you must never hit anyone. And my granny's standing behind her saying, just do it. Just once. And then I had or have sensory issues before that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of a strange story, but like my grandpa was the only one that could cut my nails.
Interesting.
Everybody else would end up in a complete screaming match because they didn't do it right or they didn't do it well. And my grandpa would always, like, we would go on Sundays for supper, and then we would cut my nails because he was the only one that could do it right.
Part of the routine, okay.
Yeah, so anyways, yeah, it's good. Are you someone that apologizes easy, and is a good apology important to you? It's kind of the theme of the book, one of the many themes of the book, and it was one of the things that I kind of struggled with.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, apologies aren't really good at like, but what's their intention? In particular in people that are important in your life, just most people that love you don't intend to take you off or hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
So examine their intention and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
Have a conversation if needed and then move on. And so I've kind of adopted that into my current philosophy in terms of, in most cases, in most relationships that are important, apology isn't necessary for me personally, because I'm well loved in so many ways. But an apology isn't super important to me because either I can see that they didn't intend to hurt me in the first place and I can tell them that they did and move on, build the relationship that way, or they're not important to me enough to actually
to need that apology or care about it. Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I don't think that I need apologies all the time, but the flip side of that coin is I feel like it does me good to apologize if I feel like I've done something wrong, or just to acknowledge, right? So I feel like kind of a yes and a no to that question.
That's really fair. Like, I do apologize, like, I grew up in a family that yelled a lot, not because we were angry, but just because that's how we
Loud,
communicated.
yeah.
And so if I feel strongly about something and I kind of get carried away, or if I have had too many glasses of wine, or I'm tired, then I end up yelling. And my current family, with my kids and Aaron, like, we don't yell. And so when I get kind of irritated or whatever, then I just kind of revert to what I grew up with. And in my family, I could yell and they could yell at me and nobody got hurt feelings.
Right.
No, like, that's just the way we were. But that's not the way my kids react to that. So I occasionally apologize to my kids, probably more than anybody else, just to say, you know what, I didn't handle that well. Sorry about that. Let's, in the future, this is my plan.
Well, and that's maybe a parenting thing too, right? Of modeling that for kids so that they know what that is. But, you know, between you and Aaron, it probably doesn't matter a whole bunch, but with the kids, it can feel different, I think.
Yeah. Do you name your vehicles?
No.
You don't? Okay.
I can say no, I do not.
I liked Audi and Renault, and what was the other one? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
We do name our vehicles. My current vehicle is named Chubby because she is wider than she is tall.
Okay.
And Aaron's vehicle is called Hubert.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think that's fun. I don't think I'm creative enough to come up with a name. Just not something I've ever done.
All right, so the next section is I have prepared something for
I can't
you
wait.
that was inspired by the book. Do you have any guesses of what I prepared?
Well, I wondered if it was biscuits, dream biscuits.
Mhm.
Okay.
It is. That's an excellent guess. So I have dream biscuits, and these are a homemade version of Dane bars, Dawn bars.
Yes. Okay.
Apparently, it's like a common Swedish
Do you
chocolate
think
candy
it's
bar.
the chocolates that you can buy at IKEA? That's what I wondered about. Have you ever bought the chocolates at the checkout at IKEA?
I have not.
I wondered if that's what these were, but I'll taste one and I'll let you know. It's been a long time since I've had an IKEA chocolate, but the name rang a bell, so I kind of wondered.
Well, let me tell you about the dream biscuits.
Okay.
So they're cookies that have an ingredient that I have never used before called baking ammonia.
Oh, okay.
I was able to source the baking ammonia locally, which absolutely shocked me. There was one package left and they said, hurry on down, it's sale day and we can't save it for you long. So I left work and I beelined to the store to buy this baking ammonia. And so I thought, like, come on, it can't be ammonia, like that's not edible. So I read a little bit about it, and it is to replace baking soda or baking powder.
Okay.
And apparently baking powder specifically has a taste that I have never, like, people who don't have baking powder all the time
notice it.
would notice.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, it's in all of our baking, so I think it's there, and we just don't know.
Okay.
So anyways, this is dream biscuits. This baking ammonia, I thought when I opened it up, of course, what am I going to do? I'm going to take a whiff of it. It smells like Clorox.
Really?
It's so much so that Aaron's like, I'm just gonna like watch you to see if we need to, because the aroma was through our full main floor.
Really?
Yes, and so we looked it up on multiple ways to confirm that it was acceptable
Safe.
to eat, and we have consumed some and we're fine.
Yes.
But yeah, and the aroma dissipated, and then once they were cooked, the house smelled like regular cookies. But until that scent from the cookies started, it was just Clorox.
No kidding. Wow. Okay.
And yeah. So
do you feel like they rose in a different way, or is it just about the flavor?
You'll notice right away.
Okay.
So it's more about the texture. So yeah, help yourself.
Okay, I can't wait.
It's different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like I've eaten things with this texture before, but I've never baked anything with this texture before.
They're really good.
Thank you. It's different. Yeah,
it's very buttery, but extremely light.
and it's kind of melty.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not shortbread, but kind of reminiscent of, there's something to it like that.
But just so much lighter than a shortbread.
Yeah. All right, and then these are kind of like score bars. And so they have,
I can't wait. That is what those things are like.
yeah, help yourself.
Okay,
And
I'll
so-
stick a little one here.
Yeah, I don't think the proportions are quite right. I think there's that candy in the inside that I made with butter and sugar and cornstarch. And so you make that in advance and then put it in a mold and then dip it in chocolate afterwards. And so I didn't realize, in the recipe it said, oh, it cools down really quickly, so make sure you spread it out. I didn't really understand how quickly because I couldn't spread it as thin as I wanted, because as soon as it got off the heat, it was firming up. So anyways, if I made it again, I would make the centerpiece a little bit thinner so that it's a little bit easier to chew.
It is also delicious.
I didn't use the highest quality chocolate, but I think it's still pretty fun. There was a few other things that I wanted that were referenced in the book for food, but I think these were the dream. I really liked Maud. She's the one that always had the biscuits, and then when they were moving locations, and they had to just pack the essentials. She was packing all her biscuit tins, which I thought was pretty fun.
And she had tin after tin after tin of biscuit, because the worst, was that what it was? The worst? Ate like 3 or 4 tins a day, it seemed like.
Yeah,
And she just always had more.
I love it. I love it. All right, well, moving on to our third segment. Have you ever been to the Lloydminster Public Library before?
I have.
What is your favorite thing about the public library here?
Well, I love books. So I think anytime you're in a space where books is the first priority, I think it's just kind of magical. So that being said, I think you have a really wonderful offering of opportunities and programming for all kinds of things beyond just coming and wanting to read a book, and I think that makes this place pretty special.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We try hard to be part of the community and be responsive and have things going on that people want to participate in, but maybe couldn't, like, I don't want to do slime at my house. I really don't. But we have slime here all the time because we know there's lots of parents that
Feel the same way.
and almost all kids love slime, so yeah.
Well, and something like slime, I mean, on its own is a really cool learning opportunity, but it's also super motivating for a kid to want to come to a place like this. And then while they're here, I don't know, I'm guessing that lots of kids, when they come for other reasons, also decide to kind of take a wander through the book aisles too. So that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, we love it that people are comfortable here, and it used to be that people just came and got their books and left, and we've worked really hard to try to create a little bit of a community atmosphere where, like, stay and play with your kids, or sit and read, or...
The last time we came, I brought my mom and dad and Emma, our youngest, and she wanted to sit at just, like, there was a few spots where there was puzzles set out, and so it's like, okay, she just had to put one piece in the puzzle. And I'm like, we're gonna be here a while, and it took a while, but she found one piece that she believes was in the right spot, so it's like, okay, good, you got your one piece in the puzzle. Now we can move on.
Do you have a favorite library memory from when you were a kid? Or with your kids?
I have a few. Like, I feel like with my own kids, their library days were at the old location downtown. So we had lots of fun there. I feel like a library for a mom with young kids is sometimes a bit of an escape. It felt like that to us. Like, it was an outing. It gave us a purpose, somewhere to go. A children's section at a library is just so exciting, and they are obviously too old now to enjoy it, but in the old location they loved you know, that little corner where they could go and you could sit right there on the comfy chairs and read some books. And we'd always bring a few books home, but they'd even just read a few there while we were there, or look at pictures anyway, and not even have to take those ones with us. We did lots of the day programming and things, and it was always just really nice to have somewhere to go, something to do. And I think in a community like ours, it's nice to have places for people to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, we went to the library very regularly because I've always been quite a voracious reader, and the rule was I could take as many books as I could carry. And so I was very, very strategic in terms of the kinds of books that I would take and the amount of words, because like I could only carry so many.
Yeah, don't take hardcovers.
That's right. So yeah, fun stuff.
I'll tell you a funny, like, this is telling, I think, a little bit into my personality and kind of the way my brain works. But as you're asking that about memories, what I have is some of my most vivid memories of the library is researching things on microfiche. I think it's because the library is the only place I could do that. So I remember, I grew up in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and there we had multiple branches of libraries in our town. But at the main branch, I remember as a high school student standing there using the microfiche to research some kind of events that had happened in the past, like looking at past issues of the local newspaper.
I could never get the speed of the roll. Like it was either zipping through or it would take me, like I never got good at the microfiche.
I think it's like an exercise in patience.
Absolutely.
And those of us that now can Google something and have the information we need in like 0.2 seconds are amazed at that information at your fingertips, because standing in front of a big microfiche machine is something else. I remember when I first started working in Lloydminster, I was working at St. Thomas School, and we were celebrating, I think it was the year 2000, and we were celebrating the 60th anniversary, no, we were celebrating the 40th anniversary of the school because it had opened in 1960. I think. So I don't know if I created this task for myself or if someone had suggested it, but I had the bright idea that I was going to make kind of a memorial book of like the history of the school, and had gone to the downtown branch of the Lloydminster Public Library and stood at that microfiche and ended up printing off old articles about the school being built and all of that. And one of the things that came out of that is that it was one of the most, it was the school that cost the least amount of money to build at the time, which was like a real claim to fame. But looking back, is it really? Is it good to think that this school was built with the least amount of money possible? I'm not sure. It's held up well. It's still going. But yeah, I was able to find like 5 or 6 articles about the school being built and things that had happened over time. And I probably spent 5 hours doing it, so I don't know that it was a good investment of time. But yeah, the good old microfiche, there's nothing quite like it.
I love that. All right, well, I think that's a great place to end our conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, see you next time.
Thanks.